Hey guys, EST here with another great video, and I'm not trying to sell you anything. Just figured I'd lead with that. So, iodine, do you need it? And there's two different answers, like do you need it in your diet? And then do you need it in case of some kind of radiation event? You know, everybody says nukes, but they forget about dirty bombs, where you just take a conventional explosive and put a bunch of irradiated material around it. That's a lot easier to come by than, like, a nuclear fission device, which is very difficult to build. And what if there's an accident that releases very radioactive material into the environment near you? And I'm not just talking about nuclear power plant meltdowns. Those are incredibly uncommon, especially in America. But what about a truck or train carrying nuclear waste or some kind of nuclear material like those used in, I want to say, X-ray machines or some kind of medical laser, I believe? Or expend fuel from a nuclear reactor. So a lot of people completely write off iodine thinking, well, a nuclear event, I mean, we got more to worry about than just thyroid cancer if there was a nuclear attack in your area. It's so hard to survive that people just think it's a write-off, which, I mean, I can get the logic there, but you're actually completely missing the number one use for iodine. So what does it do in your body? Is it even in your diet? Do you need it? What does it do to help radiation? What's the difference between iodine and iodide? Everything's getting covered in this video. And hey, if you find yourself enjoying it, maybe subscribe and check out some more of our great content, which consistently has been non-alarmist nonsense and not trying to sell you anything. Okay, with one exception, but I was right about that. There is a shortage now, just saying. So, why do you need iodine? Well, you need it for your thyroid, which creates hormones called generally T3 and T4. And those help regulate your metabolic rate and generally your temperature, but also your energy level. And there's other factors like B vitamins, but you're going to have some issues if you don't get iodine. So what if you're an infant versus a kid versus an adult? How much do you need? Is it way more? Is it way less? The big standouts, because the rest are pretty similar, is infants and pregnant women. And then kids actually need less than adults. But incredibly young humans need it for nervous system and skeletal development, so they need a little bit more. So if you don't get enough, you get something called a goiter, which is when your thyroid gets a lot bigger, so you get this big bulge on your neck, because that's where your thyroid is. And it's just trying to get bigger so that it can filter more iodine out of your bloodstream. So the normal storage amount that you have hanging around if you're an average adult is 15 to 20 milligrams. And then I think that's 85%. The other 15% is stored elsewhere in your body, and I think it's mostly used by your immune system one way or another. Now, I don't like the phrase that I've heard thrown around, which is iodine has been discovered to help immune function. No. Without iodine, your immune system functions worse is a more accurate descriptor. So if you're sick, taking iodine won't really do anything unless you don't have enough iodine, which is kind of similar to vitamin C as well. Now, the good news is once it's in your body, your stomach sends it to the bloodstream very quickly. That's right, your stomach and your duodenum, which is the thing that connects to your small intestines. You don't have to wait for the material to get into your intestines to get into your bloodstream. It goes quick. So generally what the normal person needs per day is about 100 mcgs, which is micrograms, which is 1/1000th of a milligram. So 0.1 milligrams. Grams, of course, a unit of weight. If you think, oh, there's 50 grams of sugar in this one can of soda, milligrams isn't that much. And 1,000 milligrams of salt will make you pretty thirsty. So 0.1 milligram per day, that is not much. Now that's what they call AI, which is adequate intake to remain healthy. And you tend to, if you get more, excrete, I think it's 90% via urine. So you kind of do need an ongoing amount, because it's just take it or leave it, store it. Once the thyroid's full, you're good. Now it can obviously grab more than that out of your bloodstream if needed, but that was a little bit harder to measure because you'd have to make someone iodine deficient on purpose and then track it, which is very medically unethical. But they did measure the average daily intake based on what people ate with US adults, and it was a fairly recent study, 216 micrograms per day, so about double. And the range, besides the average, was about 141 to 296 across all ages and genders, with just average, eat whatever you want. So the chances of you in any first world country being short on iodine is incredibly low, but the reason is because they have a salt iodization program. A lot of countries have pushed this, and since you only need micrograms and it's really easy to mix into salt, and I'll get into why that is. But yeah, it's a big component of common malnutrition over the last, couple hundred to thousands of years, really. And in some places it's a problem, in some places it's not. So before we started artificially mixing in very measured amounts of iodine into our salt, which was a very recent thing, historically, how did people survive? And the answer is they tended to And the funny thing is, it was because their diet was generally kind of worse, depending upon how you measure it. So iodine is in the soil. You probably already get where I'm going with that. So almost anything that grows in soil or eats things that grow in the soil are going to have a varying amount. So if you eat a Twinkie or some kind of hyper-processed nightmare food that the 21st century is pushing, probably not a lot of iodine in there, except look at a lot of other foods that we eat that we probably shouldn't, and a lot of them contain an enormous amount of salt. And the salt contains iodine in all likelihood, so there you go. That's why people aren't walking around with goiters. But in third world countries, you might think, oh, well, more farming, more, wild fish, wild whatever. They probably get more iodine than we do. That is typically true, generally, except that some areas in their soil, they just don't have iodine or not enough of it. Now, I say iodine, it's actually iodide, which is basically a general term for a salt that one of the molecules is iodine. Oh, and in case you, didn't pay attention in chemistry class, iodine is an element. It's not a molecule, it's not a compound, it's not, I guess what they would call a complex molecule, it's an elemental element. It's like carbon, nitrogen, oxygen. So elements like to be combined with other stuff. Very few of them are highly stable on their own. And iodine is negatively charged because of the electrons. So it likes to combine with potassium. That's why you hear, potassium iodide pills. And that's what a lot of people are selling, just in case of a nuclear exposure or this or that, a radiation event. You better have these. And I'll get to that in the second half of the video. But in the soil, it does tend to be in one of a couple different iodide forms. But really, a lot of places in the world, if you just look at a map, don't have enough, and then the deficiencies are crazy all through history. So even in third world countries, because it's so cheap and easy, they've been pushing salt iodization programs. So it's not really that prevalent all over the world anymore, and that's why people don't think about it, because you haven't heard about it. It's kind of like, who gets scurvy anymore? Vitamin C is pretty easy to distribute, although the link between scurvy and vitamin C, that's a whole thing. So, go grab the container of Morton's you got in the cupboard and look, it says iodized. Imagine that. So in case you're not getting, what I've been pushing with the numbers and the amounts and the, tests and all that, do you probably need more iodine in your diet? Absolutely not, in all likelihood. And if you did, you'd know about it. And if there was some kind of radiation release of any kind tomorrow, your thyroid's probably full. But with the supply chain issues, would it remain that way? Well, if you've got some preserved food, some kind of jerky, or just something with a long shelf life, even just stuff in the freezer, it probably has quite a lot of salt. But if you need about 100 mcgs per day, let me just break it to you. There's an average of, in the US at least, with iodized salt, 45 micrograms of iodine per gram of salt, which is 1,000 milligrams of salt, and you shouldn't really exceed, I think it's about 1,500 milligrams per day. So let's see, per gram, 45 times 1.5 equals not enough. Would it be smart in case of a nuclear attack to make sure you just start every day with 3 grams of salt to get your iodine? It would work, but boy, the side effects, holy cow. You'd almost be better off just generally avoiding the fallout dust and, the 72-hour rule and up to 10 days and this and that, and block, and turn off your air intakes, run a filter, HEPA filter, that kind of stuff. You could look up what to do about nuclear fallout, but very low on the list is take iodine supplements. But they would work and they're pretty cheap. So when it comes down to what they would do for a nuclear attack, boy, and if you're not getting what any of that has to do with each other, basically radioactive isotopes of iodine could result from a nuclear blast. Now remember, I said not selenium, not cobalt, I said isomers of iodine. So what I said at the beginning of the video was actually a little bit of a trap, and I wanted to see if people would go along with it. Because usually if people hear misinformation in the first 2 minutes, they'll leave a comment about it. So if that was you, you're very smart. What I really can't stand is people saying potassium iodide is a magic radiation immunity pill. I doubt anybody saying, take this and you could go full Fallout 4. You could just go, swim around in radioactive waste and you'll be fine because these are magic radiation blocking pills. No, they are not. They would stop your body from absorbing bad forms of iodine. So what is an isotope? Well, iodine usually has 53 protons and, believe it or not, 74 neutrons. If you take that number of neutrons and make it different because, well, it's a result of a very high energy explosion, now you have an isotope. Now, those aren't very stable. What they like to do is become a little bit more balanced and stable. So eventually, after a certain amount of time, which of course involves the term half-life, but this isn't like a nuclear physics video, is they basically turn a proton into a neutron and then eject one as ionizing high energy radiation. And then it becomes a different element. So there's gamma radiation that will really cook your turkey, but you need a lot of energy to create it. It is not really created by the decay of radioactive isotopes. But iodine-131, which of course 131 is the total between the neutrons and protons, so you can do the math to see how many extra neutrons it has there. Not really relevant, but if you're that into it. Well, 90% of the time, it will emit beta radiation, and then there's alpha radiation, which can be blocked by like a piece of aluminum foil. Very weak. Not typically dangerous to humans. I think it could maybe cause skin cancer or something. But beta radiation can penetrate a couple millimeters into other cells from point blank range. So if you're standing 5 feet away from a source of beta radiation, you're probably going to be pretty okay, generally. I mean, I wouldn't do it. And enough of anything will, fry you pretty good. But if you take it into your body, now we've got a problem. So any gland that holds fluids, let's start with that. That tends to be a source of cancer. So we're talking prostate, we're talking internal organs like the pancreas. That's a big one. Boy, very deadly. Those are usually because you took in a radioactive compound, or much more commonly a mutagenic compound that can mess with your DNA with ways other than radiation. So that's why people tend to get cancer in some places but not other places. That's where stuff accumulates and get held. Hey, remember what I said about iodine? It just goes into your thyroid and is held until you need it? And the average adult has roughly 17 milligrams of it, which is 17,000 micrograms, and you only take in / need 1 to 200 per day. So if you were to take in radioactive iodine because it was released into the environment, usually from a nuclear blast, very uncommonly from, as far as I know, nuclear waste being transported or nuclear medical stuff, although for the record, iodine-131 is used in medical uses. That's why I did throw it in. But really, we are just going back to nuclear attacks. Or nuclear accidents, of course. Your body's going to put it in your bloodstream if it's in your food. If you're breathing it in, I'm not 100% sure about that. I mean, your lungs do put oxygen into your bloodstream, but they're pretty good at filtering in or filtering out everything else. So I'm not sure if breathing in nuclear fallout and, nuclear tiny particles of dust would put it into your bloodstream, which would put it into your thyroid. I couldn't really find a source on that, but my guess and my general feeling is no. So you'd really be worried about water and food, which will absolutely accumulate nuclear fallout. Now people are saying, oh man, it's going to go into the food supply for next harvest. Hold up. The half-life on iodine is 8 days. Now, the big bad boys, once again, from a nuclear blast are iodine isotopes, strontium isotopes, and cesium isotopes. Those are the ones you really have to worry about. Cesium and strontium are 29 to 30 years of a half-life, which means that if you had a pile of it, half of it will radioactively decay in that period of time, and then it'll do half again, half again, half again, half again. And that's not even like, on average generally, but it might vary. It is exactly that much. I don't think scientists have ever discovered why that is. It's some kind of weird fundamental thing in the universe that we don't understand, but you can time a clock by it. Literally, atomic clocks. I'm not kidding, they do that. That's actually how an atomic clock works. It's absolutely fascinating, and once again, I'm going full science on this, but I think you can get the gist without having to, go take a physics test about it. So, okay, you've got iodine. Half of it's decayed into not harmful iodine within 8 days. Wait another 8 days, wait another 8 days. So if it's springtime and you're worried about it getting into your corn crops in the fall, that's a lot of 8 days, okay? You're getting way down there. And then the other thing is, strontium and cesium, 29 to 30 years, they just decay so slowly that they're not that dangerous to humans. Now, if they get in your bones like kids, oh boy. Because remember, kids are still forming their bones and solidifying them, and they just keep getting longer. Well, it's going to decay eventually, and boom, there's a blast of radiation. There's another one, there's another one, there's another one. You stretch that out over that many years, decades after the nukes were dropped on Japan, some kids had some issues. The rates of all kinds of stuff went up. So if you still want to drink the groundwater and you know that individual particles, individual atoms of iodine cannot practically be filtered by any water filter, although reverse osmosis and boiling, I'm not 100% sure, but if you've just got a traditional porous water filter that can even, get down small enough to filter virus cells out, let alone bacteria, cryptosporidium stuff, you got a pretty good emergency water filter, the iodine atoms are smaller than the molecule of hydrogen, oxygen, also known as H2O, also known as water. So you're not going to filter them out. They're going to get in your body, and they're going to get in your thyroid, and they're going to stay there for quite some time. A dangerous amount of time if it's radioactive. Then you got the animals eating the grass contains it, and now everything's irradiated. And yeah, after the events of course, Chernobyl, a lot of animals were found to be ingesting some nasty radioactive plants. And they mutated, and they got cancer, and they died. In fact, the radiation, just ambient background radiation from the event localized to that area, killed like bacteria and fungi and everything to the point where like trees would fall over and they wouldn't rot. There was nothing left to break them down. It became a radioactive fire hazard because if they caught fire, because they're just sitting there perfectly dry doing nothing and not becoming more soil, well then you'd get radioactive smoke. And that would float over and become fallout, eventually hit the ground and contaminate crops with really nasty stuff like iodine, strontium, and cesium. So with a half-life of 8 days, that's, not 5 minutes. It's right in that exact amount where you got to worry about it over the short term because it could really give you thyroid cancer or a cancer in the surrounding tissues. If it keeps, blasting point-blank beta radiation into your cells from the inside until it's all decayed, and that process is really quick, that's how you get cancer. That's how DNA flips. It'll knock a little thing out of your DNA. That's why it's called ionizing radiation. It'll screw with the electrons on the DNA molecules. And then you get a replication error, and if you're really unlucky, it will be cancer. So, potassium iodide pills, I looked them up. They are unbelievably expensive for what they are. It's a stable salt that you just go get out of soil. It's an incredibly low dose. They should sell it at the dollar store, okay? This is not difficult. We have enough iodine to iodize all the salt in America like 100 times over, and continuously and perpetually we do. Iodine is not rare. So when they're sitting there selling, $30, $40 bottles, because this will save your life in case of a radiation event, it'll save you from a very specific circumstance for a very specific amount of time. Now, one treatment, like 30 days, 60 days, that's about enough after any kind of release of any kind of radiation that contains iodine-131. And, if you just go to, does the military have them in stock and instruct people to use them? Yes, from what I hear. Generally, militaries in the world, some of them do that. A gas mask is good too, but at a certain point, you got to take it off and drink some water. So the theory is, of course, in case you're not following, you take in a whole bunch of iodine from a pill, your thyroid tops itself off and says, I don't need any more. Anything else I get in, I'm just going to pee out. And then when you eat or drink something that has the radioactive iodine in it from the nuclear event, so it's not hocus pocus nonsense like they're always pushing, what is that other one? Colloidal silver, which does next to nothing. It has its uses, but people were like, it's an anti-parasitic, and like, you need this. There's a secret, this and that cover up, alarmist nonsense, buy something from me. If you constantly watch YouTubers that say, there's a secret thing that nobody knows about, all the doctors are covering it up, and you need to buy this from me to get better from it, immediately unsubscribe. Hell, report the video. Those people are charlatans. But that said, do I personally own any iodine supplements? I do not. And I'll get to why. Now, if I got one cheap enough, we're talking $10 on down, I probably would do it. But $10, maybe $20 tops, if it was an impulse thing and I had a lot of money that week. Because the shelf life is pretty stable with these. So you buy it once you're good, that's about the level of money I'm willing to put towards that level of event versus let's just get some cool batteries. Let's get another solar panel. Let's get, anything else that could be more practical in a more common event like a weather event or an economic crisis, which at this point in 2023 is looking to be a very high probability. So if you're spending your money on that fringe thing, cool, don't spend too much. I've seen people where they're trying to sell it on a subscription. How does that even make sense? Is a nuke going to drop every month and you need a higher supply? You're insane. Don't order that. The person's just a scammer. Plain and simple, they're a scammer. But still, would I pick some up? Sure. If you've got the resources, if it's in your budget, weigh it against everything else. But if you have a very limited budget and you're like, well, what should I get? What should I do? That would not be high on my list at all. And the reason is because where can you get iodine? Before we started iodizing salt, where did people get it? Like I said, the soil, but seaweed. Number one, but it varies greatly by type. Iodine plus potassium, it's in the ocean. It's a salt. Salt is in the ocean. It's in seaweed. It's also in fish, seafood, a lot of stuff that eats seaweed, stuff that swims around in water that contains it, but it tends to be the same stuff that also contains mercury, so, there's that. So the number one dietary source that's being reported is, what's it called, nori or whatever? The seaweed wraps that you use to make sushi. And I already have some of that because I'm not too bad at making sushi. So if that was the right species and if it was from the right area of the world, I already got enough iodine right there in my dehydrated seaweed jerky. So if I already have it around the house, now the other thing is eggs, they have a lot of it, but it depends upon what the chickens were fed. Some dairy products, between 38 and 159 micrograms, MCGs, per cup of dairy products, so typically milk, but they also measured cheese. And the reason it's 38 to 159, or could be 0 from what I heard, is it depends on what the cow's diet was. And I believe corn does not absorb iodine. It like filters it or doesn't draw it from the soil or something like that. Now bread has it, but only if the flour has it, and the flour only has it if they treated it with calcium iodate. Just another molecular form of iodine. So if they use the dough conditioner or not, it doesn't by law in the US have to be on the ingredient list, so you don't know. But if you ate bread, seaweed, milk, and eggs, you probably get enough in a day, even if you have no iodized salt. And then, like I said, just have iodized salt around because you also need salt to live. You need a lot more of it, actually. Your nerves are basically made out of salt. They're potassium and sodium. Now, the thing is, iodized salt doesn't have the same shelf life as non-iodized. Non-iodized, 1,000 years, forever, basically. Iodized salt, I've heard different accounts. It's a salt mixed with a salt. To me, I think it would have a shelf life of also forever, but I'm hearing from other sources that that's not entirely true. I don't even know how you would tell if salt goes bad or what it breaks down into, but it's potassium iodide usually, I believe. Or even calcium iodide, either one. Oh no, it broke down into calcium and iodine. Oh no, I better not eat that. Like, come on, you can have potassium. In fact, you need that too. So while you can buy potassium iodide pills, you could just have salt laying around and replace it every like 5 years or so. And a whole thing of salt is still usually under $1. So that's why I would just have that and be like, okay, between this, and this, I've pretty much got iodine down. And the rest, I've got some seeds for gardening. I'm sure my garden has iodine in it somewhere. And I could eat a fish once in a while. There you go, you're good. Not to mention preserved food that would be made with iodized salt as well. Now, if that dough conditioner ironically was made for bread, you're getting 300 plus micrograms per 2 slices. It's quite a lot, actually. Pasta, typically no, believe it or not. Even though that's made from a certain type of flour, it just doesn't get in there because it doesn't have it treated. So flour and corn tend to not contain iodine. And you know, I said, well, things that grow in the soil, well, believe it or not, most fruits and vegetables do not contain it either. Now, if people are saying that pasta contains iodine, it's because they put iodized salt in the water when it was boiling. So it comes back to just buy salt unless you find reliable, like from a vetted source, a good brand, because I could put anything in a pill and tell you that's what's in it. Or put nothing in it and tell you that's what's in it. And there's a lot of scammers out there, even though iodine is really cheap. Look, I've seen counterfeit silver bars full of tungsten. I don't think tungsten is terrifically cheap. I'm not sure that's the crime of the century. They probably would have been better off just filling it full of silver. It's kind of the same scenario. If you got food, shelter, safety, defense, everything covered, and you're like, well, now I got more, what am I missing? Which is, a great reason to watch this channel. Subscribe if you agree. Then I would say, yeah, pick one up, just in case. But do look at the shelf life, because once you put it in pill form, even though it is a salt compound, which should last virtually forever, I mean, it's stored outdoors in soil without breaking down. It's a very stable molecule, that's kind of the point. But the filler material in the pill can break down. So if it has an expiration date, it might just be by law, or it might be because it's made with some kind of like a sugar compound or some kind of complex, I forget what pills are made out of, but I heard that the filler, which if it's like 1 to 200 micrograms of an iodine molecule, then, shocker, it's 99.99% filler in the pill, then the pill's filler could actually expire. And usually you can tell by smelling it. Now, by law, a lot of them are not like made with compounds that can break down into just straight up poison, but, if bacteria starts eating away at it, then you got a problem. So if you can get liquid iodine, now gel caps, no, because that plastic and the quick dissolve stuff that'll dissolve in your stomach, that'll break down too, and then you just get a big old pill container full of mush. So you can actually buy pure liquid iodine in drop form because, it's used as like a sanitizing thing. Back in the day, it was used for like surgery. I'm not sure if it still is. And then it's also an antiseptic for minor cuts and abrasions. There you go. It prevents infections. Now you've got 2 uses for it, and it's way more common. So I would actually say liquid iodine pretty good, but I found some that they actually sell at Walmart. And from what I can tell, it's not pure iodine, just pure liquid iodine. It's cut with something, but as long as it's like a saline or something shelf stable and it's in a glass bottle, that's probably about as good as you're going to get compared to pills, I'm just saying. And they even say 2 drops is about 150 micrograms. Now, why would they tell you that if it's supposed to be for skin use? It's because they know people are going to eat it. But the cheapest I found was some Equate brand in America. Antiseptic, 8 fluid ounces based on iodine. It's actually 10% povidone iodine, which I don't actually know what that is. No idea what the shelf stability is, but it's $6.56. That is cheap. But if you do your research and look up, like, this is a purposely, like, known to be shelf stable, because what I'm talking about is in the cheapest plastic container, probably not BPA free, yikes. But if you find one that's, in glass and people say this has a really good shelf life, we didn't mix in anything that could expire, or it doesn't even have an expiration date, now you're probably looking at something pretty good. And the liquid will store better than the pill form generally. So if you're going to pick some up, pick up the right stuff. Like, I looked up another one at Walmart.com just because that was the first thing in the results and I figured they'd be the cheapest. Not that I support their company in any way whenever I can avoid it. It's Life Flow Iodine Plus Drops, 150 micrograms. Oh boy, healthy thyroid, energy, metabolism support. And then they said orange flavor. Why did you have to do that? Why did you have to put flavoring in it? No matter what that is, there goes the shelf life. So be careful what you buy, but iodine compounds they tend to still be on the shelves from what I saw. But don't overpay for like $30, $40, $50 pills from some, blowhard YouTuber, some idiot with a podcast, when you're probably not going to need them. The pills can't help, sanitize a wound, and the expiration on them might be super short because they kind of want you to buy more. Definitely avoid that, or because of your diet, and if you just got some salt laying around, maybe just avoid the whole thing, and that's kind of the point. What's the answer? It's not a clear yes or no, but I think after giving you the whole layout, now you know why you need it, what it does, the purposes, diet versus, nuclear. Well, I think you can make an informed decision for yourself, and that's what we always strive for on this channel. Once again, if you agree and enjoyed the content, please subscribe and watch some other cool content we got, and I will see you guys next video.